I'll keep it on all the time. You can see that little red thing says we're recording, so we're recording. The first PowerPoint appears. This is from that. I use it as a general guide for when people for the 3 classes that were here on Monday. I mean, I frame this. I try to find a frame or something interesting to talk about. It's something that would be a highlight, but since we have to do this about 3 times, I think the key concepts probably for us to understand. The first one we're going to get to is something called emergent properties. That we're going to get to right away. And the second one, something you may have heard of before, hopefully, called homeostasis. And that's really what those are the 2 big features of this initial chapter. Maybe we can talk about properties of life. I have terrible handwriting. If you can't read it, just stop me. You hear about it. A lot of times I'll even spell things for the recording that are there. Well, 1 second. Let me just quickly answer this, if you don't mind. Off we go. That one just chimed in. So we start here. I mean, this is just basic historical material. And I will say this again, if you haven't heard it as yet, since you're sort of new to the collegiate sphere, most of you, I would anticipate, is the idea of PowerPoints. And I know you probably used them. I don't just sit here and read them. I try to explain about them. To me, they're a guide. They don't ever come to a professor or instructor, anybody's teaching you, and go, the PowerPoint said this. PowerPoints are not subject to editorial review. And the whole idea of that, since they're not subject to editorial review, they're not the same as a textbook or a scientific article. Now, if you came to me and said, you mentioned this on the PowerPoint, and I got this question. I mean, if you have I'm willing to discuss it with you. Not all instructors are. I've been doing this a long time. I've had 2 careers. I don't get excited about that stuff. My ego can take the hit. If I messed up grading an exam, I'll make sure everybody benefits from it. Like everybody, I'm human like everybody else. We all make mistakes. But trust me, when you go and you'll learn which instructors you can come up to and be aggressive, so to speak, about grading, and ones you cannot. It's a skill you need to learn early on, because some of them, whatever the colloquial, they feel disrespected, whatever the colloquialism is. Understand, my pop culture references are from 50 years ago. It's okay. I can take the hit. Periodically, you see pictures of grandchildren and a great-grandson. So you can take that. I can take that. Not a single one of them shook their head. I was counting on you. And said, you can't be that old. Not a single one of you. You just stood there. TAFOL. You know what that means? Thanks, AF a lot. I get that at home. Well, you love this. It's for my granddaughter. My granddaughter, who has the great-grandson, is now, will be 24 in December. And when she was young, like 9 or 10, we were between divorce, both my wife and I. So I was living in an apartment. She was over, I was watching her. There's nobody around, hanging out. And I go, oh, hey, you going to shower before you go home? And she goes, I forgot my hairbrush. And I went, oh, that's not a problem. I got towels. You can have my hairbrush. She goes, why do you need a hairbrush? Just give me a shot when I'm 10 years old. It's not fair. It's absolutely true. Why do you need a hairbrush? and you don't flip off your granddaughter when she's watching. You just don't. I might, considering it. Little true anecdotes that are there. So some of this is not. The first is it starts right away. Early healers depended on superstition. No, they didn't. Did some? Yes. But why make a blanket statement? Some. You could have put a little, just a tiny adjective. The first medical science was very well developed in Egypt. The first mention of breast cancer was on Egyptian hieroglyphs. Okay? Ancient Greeks, the foundation of modern medicine. Surgical instruments that we use today, like the hypodermic syringe. Ancient Rome, it was used on the gladiators. And they didn't, and understand the physicians were not high up on the pecking order. They weren't, they were there to make sure the gladiators could go out and, kill each other. That's all they were. They were slaves, very much. Or at the lowest social strata. Perhaps just slightly above slavery because they had a skill. And they used a variety of herbs. They used a variety of different things. And a lot of our science come from that. And they'd make infusions. And if they take different kinds of mold, that's where penicillin comes from. It's bread mold. Okay? They use willow bark. That's where aspirin comes from. So we learned about things naturally occurring where they came from. Was there superstition or magic? Sure. My knowledge, and even a more advanced medical culture, was Eastern medicine, which I have absolutely no expertise and I'm unqualified to tell you. But they were light years ahead in treatment for things like burns. If you think in Japan, there's earthquakes. They dreaded fire more than anything else. That's why they built their homes weren't built out of bricks and things like that. They were paper and wood, so they easily could come down and easily could go back up again. So if you understand a little bit historically about these things, and again, so many different kinds of healers that had knowledge about it. So I think what happened, unfortunately, at the fall of the Roman Empire, and it's not to disparage the church, but church dogma, the rules were very strict. They felt they couldn't accept the fact that things they couldn't see could cause disease. It was something that Pasteur basically brought it to the realm of modern science right after our Civil War in the 1860s. We learned about it in the micro. It's called germ theory. Prior to that, it began to change in the Renaissance, but what the church did during the Dark Ages, if someone got ill, it's an act of God, they're consorting with the devil. If they were injured, they put bird poop on it, which would stop bleeding, but it wasn't very good for infection. And if the part was that bad, then it had to go, and they just amputated it. There was no modern approaches. People who used things like infusions you had to do those quietly, because if the authorities got them into it, it was really kind of heresy, and they dealt with it very, very harshly. So understand the historical foundations are very, very important. It's what we base with today. Okay, so what we began to learn about at the start of the Renaissance, they wanted to know more about this. The whole idea of a rebirth. And if you wonder how, and you see it here. These are when I took my first anatomy class in 1973, 52 years ago. It's not, we certainly had advanced models and things like that, but they're showing us this and giving me this same talk. Okay, at a medical school. This is a guy named Vesalius, back in the 50s, 1500s, middle of the 16th century. Those are the same structures you'll be learning about when you get to muscles with Dr. Robinson lab. Gluteus maximus, latissimus dorsi, trapezius here, deltoids here, etc., triceps here. It didn't change. The human body hasn't changed. And what they did, very quietly, very surreptitiously, where people couldn't see them, they would dissect dead bodies. And the great artists were able to use that knowledge to create those magnificent sculptures, to create those magnificent paintings, to really be able to create things. It's remarkable. And as then science, they began to study what the changes were, and they began to understand a little bit better what these things were, blood vessels, and these, and, and if they were clogged, that meant something. Where they saw areas of damage, it was the early days. That's really the onset of anatomy, which literally means to cut up. When you owe me something in science, particularly in medicine, it means to cut. When I would cut into a bone, it was called an osteotomy. The prefix for bone is osteo, only means I cut. If I removed a section of bone, or better yet, if I didn't do general surgery, if I removed a section of an appendix, is called that. You know it now. It's an appendectomy. When you ectomize, you remove something. We did neurotomies, cut into the nerve, and we did neurectomies when we moved a section of the nerve that was damaged. So, and this nomenclature, this naming is unfortunately stuff you're going to have to become familiar with. You have the luxury with me, for the most part, in an exam situation. If you don't understand the word, maybe optimistically you can come in and say, oh, that means that. Sometimes if you come to me in the middle of the exam and say, you ask me a question, so I can say, I can't give you any more information. I'm not trying to be mean. Basically, that's code for this is something you should have, or be aware of. That's not a luxury you're going to have. For those of you going into nursing, they eat their young. Because they're married to a nurse, married to an LPN, they all went through it. Horror stories. Horror stories. So all of these things are part of it. And so anatomy and physiology, and you'll see the definitions as we come up shortly. And so, and really that's where it comes from. We don't have the facilities here to do cadaveric dissection. But only large universities, it's rare, maybe in graduate programs. When I was teaching, I taught for 5 years at Chatham, and eventually they got a human body because it cost them so much money to send their students to Pitt, to the medical school. They charged a fee for every student that came in. It's very expensive. There's a lot of legalities that are involved. There's also specific ways that it has to be kept and all that stuff. And I was familiar with that. But it's you don't get as much out of it as you think. I would think at a beginner. It's interesting to look at once or twice, and after that, I don't think you get a lot out of it myself at this level. So, and again, scientific method is something you're all familiar with. We do it every day. You observe something, you get an idea this is how it works in your mind, you formulate what we call a hypothesis, and you test it. Even though we're not doing it in a sense, we're all sitting here doing research. I certainly don't. But we kind of do those things. Well, I wonder if this, at home you do that. Well, I think this is how it works. I'll try to fix it this way. Unfortunately, I'm not very good at it. So most of the time I find out my hypothesis was incorrect. Thankfully, one of my sons is very, very good at doing that stuff. So I'll call him and go, how do I fix this? Oh, Dad, don't be dumb. So here's anatomy, literally means to cut up or a cutting up. And we've taken it. Physiology, as you can see, relationship to nature, but the zoology now is now effectively morphed into study of. So you're in a biology tract. Biology means study of the life, studying life. That's certainly what this is. Sometimes it's a misnomer when you take microbiology, as many of you will. You're basically studying life. Micro means you can't see it with the naked eye. It's even a misnomer because you're studying viruses and they're not living things. So, but we understand that the naming is funny. What we understand now about science has sort of advanced faster than us changing the names. And that's more relevant when you get to micro, when you learn about stuff like that. But you'll see evidence of it today, because what viruses are, if you did not know, they're not made out of cells. If you aren't made out of cells, you can't be a living thing by definition. It just drives me nuts when they say, oh, this kills viruses. No, it doesn't. Because if it's not living, how can you kill it? But it's how they sell sanitizers and disinfectants. It kills 99% of the viruses. Not on a bet, prove it. Not living in the first place. So all of that stuff, and we'll take a look at that. Variations are more common than you think. Fancy name, don't have to know now. I do it for lab. For years, I did the lab, and Dr. Robbins does it much better than I do. And he to his absolute credit, He took over all the labs and redid them because they were a mess. We had like a whole bunch of different instructors doing it, and nobody was doing it the same way. And he just built it so the students would get a lot out of it. It's hard, but it's meaningful. There are words to describe it. Effectively, we call them anomalies. It's a fancy name. Different than an abnormality is something that like somebody's got an extra arm. It's something that happens extraordinarily rarely, and it's very identifiable. An anomaly, and we all have that. We have a lot of little spare parts in our body. About half to 2/3 of us maybe, have an extra little slip of muscle in your calf. It's called the plantaris. You have a big calf muscle, which is really two major muscles wound into one that wind into the Achilles tendon. They're called the soleus and the gastrocnemius. The gastrocnemius is really two muscles, got two ends. But that's for your anatomy lab. It had this plantaris, is something it's actually a little slip of muscle. We actually use it as a biological suture. In the old days, when an Achilles tendon would rupture, we take that and we basically use that, your own tissue that you don't need. It's not going to make you any less able to do most activities. And we take this slip. It only bothers you if it hurts. So during sports, sometimes I pulled the calf muscle, and it heals in about 3 to 6 weeks, probably. Something like that. So it's not essential. And a lot of times people misunderstand that. When you have muscle injuries and joint injuries, for most of us, when we recover, it doesn't affect us performance-wise. Really, with someone who's a elite level athlete, that's when they're impacted by that. So most people we're talking about professional athletes, world-class athletes, Olympic athletes. That's when losing a degree of muscle ability really, and depending on the subspecialty that they're in. If it's a wide receiver in a football team and it affects their speed, certainly it's a big deal. If it's a lineman, probably not as much. As long as their strength isn't really diminished significantly. Why did I skip that? I have no idea what that means. That's the organization. That's the emergent property study. So we'll get going with that and keep going after that. Let's see how we do it time-wise. We're doing okay. We've successfully answering my wife's question. So I am not in trouble. So emergent properties, what you're looking at is called the hierarchy of anatomy. When I taught in this classroom the last time, they had right over there a periodic table of elements because it's a science classroom. I was so upset when they didn't actually start to make you see H and HE over there, hydrogen and helium. They yell at me when I write on those things. That's mine. So what I'm going to do is I'll ask my department chair to order one for this room. But it really all starts with that. That's what's up. And whether you are aware of it or not, our next chapter is biochemistry. So really, to understand what goes on, we're really building a human body. When you're building a human body, you got to start at the basics. And the basics are subatomic particles. What's meant by an emergent property is we increase a level of complexity in this hierarchy from least, I say not important, but least organized to most organized. You have new properties that come out. It does something else, something great. So if you're sitting here, most of you probably know what a proton, neutron, and electron, what all matter is made out of. But they all look alike. They're all the same. A proton is a proton, or electron is an electron. They don't have an identity. The proton that make up whatever materials in this table are the same as the protons that make up that are in that brick. They are. But when you put them together in an organized fashion, we get atoms. And now we have an identity. We have a physical and frequently a chemical property. That's what's called an emergent property. So now something new has emerged that makes them, at the very least here, identifiable. And the one we're all constructed of, the one that not all, but effectively nearly all of our food supply comes from, is this guy, carbon. It's the same carbon that makes coal or graphite, yet we are carbon-based organisms. And what you're going to see when you do the chemistry in note, you're not going to have to make chemical diagrams like chemistry. We won't have to play with those little dots you've heard of. You have to understand a little bit about how they work because it's all about how they bond. Yeah, we're based, the energy that we get, that we are able to do whatever our activities comes from what we ingest, foods that we eat, liquids that we consume. And what we do is we take apart bonds between carbon and carbon and hydrogen, for example, and those bonds are made out of electrons, little e with a negative sign, and we suck the life out of them. We gobble up the energy and we spit out the electrons. That's how it works. So we are a carbon-based life form. The beauty of carbon and why that's a good atom to talk about is it has the ability to bond with 4 different things, and it's very symmetric. Symmetry is very useful because what it does is things that have a lot of those, carbons to carbons and carbons to hydrogens, very symmetrical, all the charge is balanced. Balanced charge in small things, they can squeeze through membranes. What I'm basically introducing to you is one of the major concepts in life. And you heard about it when you were little. Oil and water don't mix. Basically, we're all about fat soluble and water soluble. That because all we are is a construct of is a series of membranes. We have membranes around our cells. We have membranes around our organs. We have membranes around everything. And by definition, they're all semi-permeable. Some stuff is in, some stuff is in. It's just the way it is. And that's really, and it's because fats themselves are different. And really, this is it's going to compose with something you're going to learn about called, and you may have learned about it already, called non-polar covalent bonds. They're rich with energy, and we consume them. They're delicious. I'm also a foodie, and I'm a sportsaholic. So I use it in a lot of analogies, but yes. Thankfully, you're here on Wednesdays, because if there's a Sunday when an event, when, oh my heavens, the Steelers could possibly lose a game, you do not want to be here on that Monday, or Tuesday if it's Monday. I will not be happy. I have one of those like foam bricks you throw at the TV set. I'm one of those people. So I have another son who's like that as well. Nevertheless, so that basically is atoms. Now, when we put, but very rarely do we have atoms that are individual. Coal and graphite might be an individual atom that has certain physical properties that are significant to us. But most of the time we deal with what are called molecules. Molecules mean that 2 atoms are joined together at the minimum, 2 or more atoms. So we join the really common ones together, we get some really important gases, hydrogen and oxygen. Without oxygen gas, we can't function. All of those wonderful electrons, we have to find a parking place for them when we use them. Once we strip the energy out of them, the problem is those unpaired electrons, very annoying, they can damage them. And oxygen is, we grab onto them. We grab on, and oxygen grabs onto a couple of those electrons and makes an O with a -2 charge. We're going to get to that. It combines with 2 what we call protons. Those are 2 hydrogen ions. We're going to get to that. You don't have to worry about it yet. We'll cover it in chapter and verse. And voila, we get a wonderful waste product, water, H2O. That's the beauty of us using oxygen. We take waste products and bond to it, and something we can easily get rid of. And then we take some of that oxygen, we bond it with the carbon dioxide, something else we can get rid of. Very well organized. That's also an emergent property. Now it's a molecule if it's 2 or more, but sometimes it's a compound. So where O2 is a molecule, a subset of molecules or compounds where the atoms are different. And now you see some of the emergent properties. Salt, different still. Glucose, C6, H12, O6, different still. Sure. Simple sugar, but sure. If I hero corn sugar. Somehow I'm thinking Christmas candy. Potentially. Why does the Jewish guy think that? I don't know. I mean, a lot of Christmas candy. Marble, you know that thing? You guys know that. You've done that. Why does the Jewish guy think that? I love that stuff. If it's candy, it's got to be me. So, don't tell my wife if you see me have candy. Shh. Don't tell my wife if you see me have candy. If she comes in, you know nothing. She'll yell. Okay, moving on. That's a molecule. That in and of itself, even though they're powerful and they're important, they're small. And so the next step to have more properties, big ones, and the most important ones certainly are DNA and RNA, which if you're alive, you have to have in every single one of your cells. And moreover, after that, proteins. And ladies and gentlemen, believe me, you are what your proteins say you are. The genetic code is all about one thing, making proteins. And really, it doesn't exclude us being something, but it's the basis for being something. So it's almost like a set point that you work out. I love sports. I have a vertical leap of about 1/4 of an inch. I'm terrible at them. I love them. So I mean, I don't have that ability. So yeah, I wish I had it, but don't. But that's the idea. Now all of a sudden they have special properties. RNA allows us to assemble proteins. DNA has the genetic code. DNA allows ourselves to replicate. It allows us to replicate. And it holds on to the genetic code so the RNA can express it and make proteins. But we're not done yet. Then that's another. Now, if we take those macromolecules and we put them together, we make a little organ called an organelle. The most famous organelle, and the ones we are composed of, are all called membrane-bound organelles. We have some that are not. But really, what defines us as a cell, we are a special kind of a cell that differs from, say, a bacteria. Bacteria is a living thing. Bacteria is a single-celled organism, very simple cell. Why they impact us so much? Everything they do is about reproduction. They really don't do a whole lot else. Waste products sometimes hurt us. Sometimes they're inherently toxic to us. But all they do is make more of them and fast. We are what are called the eukaryotic cell. That's a fancy word, eukarya. Eu means with. The karyon is like the core of the kernel. So early anatomists said, that nucleus. And the nucleus is really the core of the kernel. But in reality, it's nothing more than a membrane-bound organelle. It's a semi-permeable membrane bound that has DNA and RNA in it. Some protein. And yet that controls everything. A mitochondria, an energy plant, has a membrane on the outside, semi-permeable, a membrane on the inside, semi-permeable. It's got ribosomes, RNA, it's got proteins, and it's an energy plant. We have scads of them, tons of them. I mean, if you're like me and every so often endeavor, again, don't. I tell her I went over Planet Fitness. Oh, you went to Planet Fitness. But I try to work out 3-4 times a week, basically on the treadmill, cardio. That's why you had the opportunity to say you don't look your age. Yet that's right, effed it up. Keep trying. There'll be opportunities. I get this. I get it home. So again, emergent properties. Now we take a bundle of those And now magic really happens. The single most important thing from emergent properties, we take all those organelles, we take other structures that are not membrane bound, ones that are membrane bound, we put a whole bunch of liquid and gel in there we call cytosol or cytoplasm, and voila, surround it with yet another membrane, and we got a cell. We're all made out of cells. And the cell is the first thing that can function independently. You said bacteria is a single-celled entity that can reproduce. Not that we are much more complicated, but we have cells that function just like that. Most of our attacking white blood cells, called neutrophils, basically, they function. We make tons of them, but they function independently. There's hordes of them that go all over, but they're not tethered together. They're not some army that's marching with orders. They go all over the body, and they're attracted by certain chemical signals. And effectively, what they do to kill things, so to speak, to stop the damage of a bacteria, is they roll over it and attach to markers on it and stop it. It's kind of how your immune. We don't do immune system in this. And that marks it for other white blood cells to come along, called macrophages, which means big eater, and gobbles them up. I love that. We isolate and immobilize stuff that hurts us. We tag it, and then a cell that has not, its whole job all day is to eat. I've been waiting for the job board. I'm waiting to put that up on Indeed. I can get paid to do that. Nevertheless, and there's so many, we're going to look at the cells and we'll look at the variations. In lab, you'll see variations of them. But it's the first one that has all the things that life is about. It could theoretically function independently. It can reproduce. It has borders that respond to stimuli. It has DNA and RNA. All of those things that we're going to go over parts that make living things living, as it were. They're all there. And so now, we're really getting busy. And something for some of you who had lab already, you talked about epithelial cells, right? Lining tissue. A tissue is an accumulation, a grouping of similar and or identical cells. Basically, by and large, lining tissues are tethered together and they line things. They line the inside of your heart. They line a blood vessel. Those kinds of cells are very smooth. So when something goes through your heart or a blood vessel like blood, it's like coated. So it doesn't adhere or stick. When it starts to adhere or stick or bump, it causes turbulence, and it makes blood clot. It's not hard. It's like this. It's the distinction between the lazy river and the raging rapids, in Kennywood terms. That's Pittsburghese. I am not originally from Pittsburgh. It's my adopted city. I was raised 20 minutes from an actually big city called New York City. I know. I will come to New York vernacular at some juncture. Happy to do so. There's still a little bit of the lilt that's there. So I have yet to get in touch with my inner Yinzer. I married two Pittsburgh girls. Again, not at the same time. One from Stanton Heights and one from Bellevue. Right around the corner from here off of 65. It must be it's an attraction, thankfully. So tissues, but when they aggregate together, we have another thing. They're a lining cell. Maybe they're a cell that's going to make glands. They're going to be lining in a gland and produce something like perspiration, or produce something like an enzyme that helps us digest. So that's the beauty of that. They take on an additional property. And then the big one is here. Two or more, you can't just have one type of tissue. Two or more tissues make an organ. Soon we'll talk about skin. Skin has three. It has two types of connective tissue and one type of lining tissue. And you throw them together, you have skin. It's got deep dermis, superficial dermis, and the lining tissue is epidermis, which is called stratified squamous keratinizing epithelium. And you'll be getting that in lab, and we'll be reinforcing it in here. Okay. But that's all, so that's different. And you'll see the illustration that they have here. And when we have groups of these types of organs, the liver is a simple organ that we can't live without. It has two types of tissues. It has the basic cell, we call hepatocyte. Hepato is the prefix for liver. And any part of the liver, the cells are identical. If they're identical healthy, they're identical bad. Doesn't matter. We take a sample called a biopsy. They all look the same. Okay, and it has a firm, denser tissue called a capsule that holds everything in place. That's all it is. And it's so simple, and the cells are so busy and reproductive that we can now do live liver transplants. If you did not know it, effectively, Pittsburgh is the transplant capital. Not just the United States, it's probably the center for transplantation that transplant centers have taken their cue from for the last 40 to 50 years. Since the late Dr. Thomas Starzl came here from Denver and basically created the most famous transplant center in the world at Presby. Just saying. So and there's a lot of interesting stuff that started here. The fact that if you had an ear infection and you're not penicillin allergic, you use amoxicillin. Everybody does. Research done here. Polio vaccine. Salk Institute here. So all of that stuff started. We had a guy who retired. His last name always escapes me. He was a medical resident. He was a medical doctor in his training years who worked with Jonas Salk at the University of Pittsburgh on the original polio vaccine. Oh, wow. Like legendary stuff. So you have all of those things, and you'll see the illustration they're talking about vascular. And when you put it all together, you got one of us. So here, voila. You see this stuff. Every time we have a level, this is heart muscle. Heart muscle is unique. It's very highly developed. Heart muscle is branched, as you can see here and here, and they're all tethered together. It's got a fancy word. You don't have to know now. That's AP2 called syncytium. SYNCTIUM. Means the cells are fused. You might have heard somebody who's suffering or even succumbed to something called RSV, respiratory syncytial virus. It's one of the things we look at now with COVID and influenza. So it's a virus. They're all RNA viruses, by the way. Nevertheless, that's what heart muscle, I mean, it's so thick and organized. It's the foundation. The heart's really just a giant muscle with blood vessels coming in and out of it. And this is the circulatory tree. Red is for arteries, which go away from the heart. Veins are in blue for going back to the heart. That's the definition. And that's just one of the major organs. That's the major system we use for conveying stuff around. That's what your circulatory system is. Healing factors, antibodies, proteins, nutrients, waste products, all happening there. And perhaps most importantly, oxygen. That's what it does. And so it's one of many systems. It joins with respiratory system because that helps to bring in the oxygen and get rid of the carbon dioxide waste product. The renal or kidney-based system, which purifies the blood. Digestive system, which works with nutrients. And they're all different systems. It's something you will need to be familiar with as we go on, because we do systemic anatomy and physiology. They used to do regional. Okay, we're just going to study everything that's in the arm, or everything that's in the head, or everything that's in the chest. That's regional anatomy and physiology. Nearly every place that I've taught, I can't tell you how many schools, all over. We do systemic. I think it's the best way to understand it. We're building a box. We'll start with the cells. We finally get the building blocks in. We're going to do skin, and then we're going to do bones, and we're going to do joints, and we're going to do muscles and nerves. And really, bones, muscles, and nerves has always been the foundation for 90% of the AP1s I've taught at. I've taught at a couple of schools where the nursing people wanted us to teach repro early, and sometimes you'll swap. And that's whatever they're doing with their nursing clinicals and practicals and things like that. That's just an accommodation to make. So that's really it. We're getting close to break time because you're going to need it. Why it works. We now, I'm beginning to understand this stuff. If you did not know, the word non-invasive is just that. We assume, and again, the word assume is significant. We do not think that non-invasive things are not supposed to harm us. Understand that it would be kind of far-fetched to imagine it does. When you think about something invasive, it's different. If you're getting If you're doing an MRI with contrast, if they inject you with something to see it better, that's different. Now that's invasive. If you're getting a CT scan, which is X-rays, that's by definition invasive. You're being exposed to radiation. That's invasive. They didn't have to stick you with a needle or give you medicine or swallow something. It's still invasive because those X-rays go in and can hurt you. The difference. This is all about. These have been around for a long time. It's only in the computer age that we were able to understand the value of it. When, and I'll frame it this way, when my wife and I were trying to conceive, my first wife and I, which we were unsuccessful in doing, okay, my children I speak of were all adopted children. They actually wanted them. It's okay. My kids are great. I joke about it. That was in its infancy. Ultrasound has been around for more than 100 years. It's therapeutic. It's part of physical therapy. It provides deep heat, not of the skin. When you rub something in like a liniment, that's superficial. It's on the surface. Ultrasound is high-frequency sound waves that go through different densities, skin, liquids, and they bounce off thick structures like muscles and bones and joints, and that reverberation generates heat as the energy dissipates. And that is a deep heating thing. So for years we used hot packs in ultrasound, whirlpool in ultrasound, infrared light in ultrasound to try to rehabilitate something with range of motion, different types of stuff. Now we were able to take computers and take that reflected signal and use a computer algorithm to be able to tell what's there. We put that into a computer. They've been doing something like that in the early. That's really what sonar is. If you're familiar with the nautical aspect, you're shooting out sound waves, and if it pings off of, you want to be careful with it because it tells you your identity, where you are, in a metallic object like a submarine or another submarine or a destroyer will do that. And if you've ever seen it, it doesn't give you show you what it looks like. You're looking at sort of like a waterfall pattern and irregularities in that point to something's out there. So I mean, that's kind of what it's based on. So now magnetic resonance was something we used in the chemistry lab. We took stuff we dissolved and we spun magnets around it. And resonance is when the magnet's spinning imparted energy. And those protons, those H pluses that we're filled with, they're very sensitive. As the magnets spun, they charged up with energy. As the magnets slow down, they release the energy. And that is what resonance is. It's changing energy levels that we can induce. So we would get a display. We didn't have anything like a sophisticated monitor or color or anything like that. We had like a graph that just ran, the paper ran, and we got little blips, and you interpreted the blips with the stylus. They took a computer algorithm and were able to translate that based on the number of spins and what organic materials were where, and voila, all of a sudden we get this magical picture of what's inside. With X-rays, they did a computer algorithm. With tomography, which is taking serial X-rays and slants. We originally used to do that for tomography to look for, well, sometimes there was an irregular bone that might have been fused, but it should not have been to a bone, like a birth defect. Everything is different. And that's the beauty of the age you live in, how things have changed that we live in now. But we did not have the benefit of that. I can't even begin to tell you. I've got my doctorate to start treating people as a doctor rather than as a student in 1977. It's almost 50 years ago. Changed a lot. I wouldn't recognize. I haven't operated in a hospital since 2000. So all I know is stuff that's in the past. But I'll probably give you some ideas. I don't think I'd feel out of the environment. Mm-hmm. That help you? Okay. So I'll finish with that. Let me have another minute. We'll take a break. You all sit over there? Good to go? Nice. I know sometimes I go fairly fast because I have so much material to cover. So, all right. And on that note, let's leave it there. Let's take that break anyway. I'm thinking about it. So let's say 4:25, about 13 minutes. Stretch, do whatever you want. If there's some other stuff, we are recording it, and if you access the recording, which I'm going to send to everybody, you're going to see this information as well. You won't necessarily see what I'm writing on the board, but sometimes if I've written a lot on the board, I'll take a picture. You take a picture of it and send it to everybody. Okay, so break away, have fun, relax. Suppose I have to look. Oh, don't disturb me. Wait. Go ahead.
So I show English for 4-H all year. I have a show at 5. Is there any way I could get my notes by myself?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll send them to you.
Okay, perfect.
What are you showing?
I show pigs.
Oh, really?
And hysteria. But my show's at 5 tonight, and when I was talking to all of my friends that had this class, they were like, "Oh, it's only 15 minutes." So I was like, "It's a
No,
mistake."
not yours.
No.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right.
How
Thank
I
you.
mean, we can't have a whole lot of shows left.
What'd you say?
We can't have a whole lot of shows.
No, it's only this week. So I was like,
Okay, good.
and in high school, in high school, I was just like, I didn't go the first week, but in college, I was like, I can't do that. You know what I mean? So thank you so much.
Where's this?
It's in Beaver County.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's where I live. So
Where's the fairground?
Big Mountain.
Hmm?
Big Mountain. It's
Oh.
in New Swigley.
It's close to where I am. I'm in Greenberg Township. So
There you go. Yeah, yep, that's where I show.
Okay, good.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck. Telling me we're gonna have a kitty. We're gonna have a kitty. Tell me. Oh, please.
Yeah, before. Like you're right. We're out. No, I just had it like watch. What she said today. That's what I was like, that's sweet. Where's my phone? Where's your phone? Why do That's just like yeah.
Right. All right, we're going to get started. I didn't halt the recording, so there'll be some dead space if you come back and listen to this. Unfortunately, not by intent, mind you, but nothing really happening with that. I totally forgot. I was busy with looking something up. So on that note, we'll get back. I want to go through so you don't just spend a ridiculously long amount of time here. But some of this is fairly straightforward. I mean, there's really one other area. We talk about homeostasis and feedback that you really have to remember. But really, this is cell theory 101. Everything is made out of cells. All cells come from pre-existing cells. So all living things are made out of cells. Again, simple things like bacteria, simple single-celled organism. And we just happen to be multicellular and a much more complicated cell with all those organelles. We're going to spend a long amount of time, a whole chapter, really it's 2 chapters in this text, talking about the cell, the nuances, talking about membranes, how things move across membranes. Basically, the whole idea, the other concept that really today is, you'll see it written as homeostasis. It's maintaining the internal environment within the body, maintaining it in a relatively constant state. I mean, we have the ability, it was cold this morning, I had a sweater on, I had that in the class this morning, now I took it off. I mean, we can do things like turn the heat on, open a window. I mean, we have that element of control. So we can adjust to our surroundings, but a lot of living things don't have that kind of a luxury, yet they manage to maintain a stable internal environment. We do that. If I gave out, for fun, we each gave everybody a new thermometer, digital thermometer, to take your temperature now, and we took it at the end of at the break and at the end of the class. Well, some of them may be the same. They probably would not all be the same. It's basically when you take a temperature, any of the vital signs, pulse, blood pressure, respirations, they are all snapshots. And it varies around what we call a set point. That's your normal. Normal, I mean, we generally use 37 degrees Celsius or 96.8 Fahrenheit. It's a science class, we use Celsius. But there's always variation within the course of the day. All of that happens to us. It doesn't mean you're abnormal. And some people it's less. Some people their blood pressure isn't the 120 over. In fact, most it's not. Some it's my wife's. I know it's usually 110, maybe over 60. Okay, and there's, by the way, there's no problem with blood pressure that runs low. There's nothing dangerous about. We're not talking about a shock type of situation. We talk about that when we do blood pressure and blood vessels, and that's mostly in AP2. But understand, those are normal variations that we expect. Like I've been running around all day. This is 6.5 hours of me talking. I mean, I would anticipate that my internal temperature. I know I'm a little bit dehydrated because I don't try to drink a whole lot. I don't want to be running to the bathroom 63 times when I have 6.5 hours out of 8.5 to talk. Just the way it is. I get yelled at. My wife yells at me about it. Nevertheless, that's really this internal environment. But as long as it's relatively constant, we're doing really well. And I mean, the interdependency of cells, there's so many examples of it. I was using an example in your bone marrow. Your bone marrow has one kind of membrane that adheres to all the interior of the bones, and what we call the marrow cavity. It's a giant space with a lot of surface area. But it's that lining works with really the blood forming, all of your blood cells, your white blood cells, and there's 5 different major types. Your red blood cells, the platelets, which help your blood clot, all come from it. And they work their way from the bones into the rest of the circulation. Bone has a fabulous blood supply because of that. It's very unusual for bone to have any problems healing due to blood supply unless it's been stripped away in some terrible accident. Okay. And so they depend on one another to adequately bring the blood into the area so the new cells can be put into it. And then there's other areas where the blood circulates, like the spleen and the liver, where they can take out cells that have sort of reached their best by date. Okay, even red blood cells only last for 90 to maybe 120 days, and they get gobbled up by your spleen when they start to break down. And white blood cells have basically a limited lifespan, if you want to think of it that way as well. So all of that kind of intertwines. So there's so much interdependency in almost any function you look at, and structure and function are constantly interrelated. What's interesting about that is I'll share a lot about bone because I know a lot about bone. You know, every professor, every lecturer, anybody who's teaching you a class has areas they know a lot about and areas they don't. I try to make sure I'll qualify it. If I something I really understand well, I'll tell you. And if I don't, and I'm just trying to give you what knowledge I can, what I've been able to prepare for, I'll tell you that too. There's nothing wrong with saying I don't know. And particularly for those of you in patient care, there's nothing wrong with saying that. You don't have to know something. You just have to care about it. So saying I don't know, but I'll find out for you is a very good answer. Because people respect it. Nevertheless, the interrelationship bone, you can see its structure. It's made of concentric rings of a thing called collagen. And the rings are assembled spiraling clockwise and then counterclockwise, one inside of the other, or one outside and the next one outside of that, etc. You'll see diagrams of it. Moreover, it's got a protein in there that attracts calcium. Surely something that's got that kind of structure, that's pulling calcium into hardness, is going to be super important for structural things to occur. That's what bone does. That's the magic of bone. In that regard, we can see the structure. We know this is something that's got to be able to support or generate power, something things can anchor to. A lot of the functions that bone has, we can deduce from what it looks like, both visibly, certainly, but we're going to look more microscopically in the lab. It's going to be more macroscopic, meaning that's something you're going to have. You're going to have touch the bones. You're going to identify the individual bones, the markings on the bones, special things. Where big things attach, and even small things attach, where things go through. Biologically, we use all of those things. Energy is very, very, we do energy transformations. Talked about it briefly. We basically suck the energy out of things, and we store it in something you're going to learn about called ATP. ATP is a fabulous molecule we're constantly building up and breaking down. We're going to get to it. It's almost like that's the amount of energy you have. We try not to spend it foolishly. We're not taking it down to the casino and spending it. We're not going out. If I have a functional car, I don't have to go out and buy a new one tomorrow because mine's getting a little old. My car only has 150,000 miles on it. It's a baby. My last two, I both had 250,000. We're like that. Okay. It's okay. Everybody, if somebody like a new car, that's fine with me. Everybody does their own thing. that they want to do with their money. Nevertheless, what we do is we use basic principles in our body to generate energy, high concentration to low concentration. Oxygen and carbon dioxide. We have air out. It's easy to come in. We use changes in pressure. Pressure is just like what we call a concentration gradient. We go from a higher concentration of oxygen to in our lungs, lower, so we can bring more oxygen to the bloodstream. We push out the carbon dioxide because there's a whole lot more in our lungs when we're getting ready to exhale than there is out. And it's helped by pressure changes, which you learn about in respiratory. When we get to the cellular level, okay, cellular respiration is different. We want to deposit the oxygen. And so chemically speaking, there's a whole lot more oxygen in the arterial bloodstream than there is in those cells. They need the oxygen to work. But they have accumulated a lot of waste products, including carbon dioxide, which arterial blood does not have a lot of, so it can come back in. They move in opposite direction. They move easily because I remember I was talking ever so briefly about nonpolar covalent. The oxygen and carbon dioxide are simple molecules that can move easily through membranes. Like I said, membranes, when we start looking at biological membranes, we'll look at it a lot. And they're called a fluid mosaic model. Fluid is just that. Fluidity means it can open and close. Unlike proteins and DNA and RNA, they're not stapled together or bonded together. Fats just kind of naturally come together, so that with a little bit of input of energy, they can open or close. It's how basically we eat things. We eat things and our cells and our digestive tract kind of surround it and pull it in so we can begin to digest it and utilize it. So it's entirely different. So we can open and close. That's what's called fluidity. It's not in one given shape. It can change. And the mosaic has to do with the proteins. Proteins are embedded in that membrane, and some of them can open and close if we want to let particles in. Typically, those are particles that can't make it through the membrane. They're water soluble. Charged particles like sodium and potassium and calcium. And we have different names for the channels and different things that govern how those channels work. So we have a lot of that going on as well. So that plays a particular role. We actually will sometimes, both in the kidney and even in the mitochondria, we'll create gradients. We'll suck in things in the kidney that eventually we want to get rid of, but that way we have more of them and we can create almost more to get rid of, and it creates a concentration gradient so that when we push out the stuff we don't want, it can carry along stuff we do. It's almost like it creates a current, like you would in the water, or if you were a swimmer in a race, drafting and get somebody leading, they're sort of cutting through the water and making your job a little bit easier. They use that all the time. We call it co-transport. So we're spending energy for one thing, but in the meantime, we're bringing 2 or 3 other things along for the party. So you're trying to maximize the energy. So, I mean, if you've got a big family, I always think it'd be foolish not to go to a place like Aldi's and shop as opposed to, go to Whole Foods and spend a bundle of money. Maybe, I mean, you decide where you want to shop based on your budget and what is important to you, certainly. But if you're working on a budget, you got to go a place that's budget friendly. So it's like we cook more than we go out to eat. We go out and figure out how we can make it and then cook. We're trying to get shrimp and grits just right. We're working on it. It's the new wannabe for us. My favorite city to visit, New Orleans. So moving on, cellular differentiation is different. So let me skip over that for a second. Cell membrane mechanisms. They're all about how, basically that's the whole idea of selective permeability. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at the different kinds of proteins that are in that membrane and their roles. Some of them help hold the cells together. Some of them allow the cells to signal to one another. Some of them have little carbohydrates, tiny short chains of simple sugars that protrude from them. They're for identification. So they're the reason my blood's A positive and maybe yours is O positive and yours is B negative. It's genetic in origin, but how it manifests itself is by little short chains of carbohydrates protruding from proteins. And we'll look at all those when we start to really look at the intricacy of the construction of the cell. That's there. And so membranes have a variety of functions. They can communicate with each other. And I mean, this is a good demonstration of it. We backwards to that heart. So all those when one heart muscle contracts, it tells the next one to contract, and the next one, we call it bifurcating. They fork, they split. And it splits here, so one cell attaches to two more, and those two cells to two more each, now you got four. And it forms this mass. When one cell starts, hopefully it's your pacemaker, it sequentially sends that signal. It communicates. There's little openings that allow charged particles to go from one cell to the other, go, it's your turn, it's your turn. So that's cell-to-cell communications. There are things that hold the cells together. They're like little rivets. They've got a fancy name. They're called desmosomes. You'll see that when we look at the anatomy. You really study cardiac anatomy in AP 2, but we'll highlight it a little bit in lecture just to show you the complexity of it. And it's right here where these little lines are. They've got a fancy name. You don't have to know. They're called intercalated discs. They have a lot of surface area, so it allows for the communications to go on. It's brilliant. That's the way that system works. There's so many things that they do, and you have to understand a little bit how that is, so down the road, you can understand something called an electrocardiogram. Not for everybody. Not everybody's going to have to know that, but in nursing, you will. Students, you're new at this. If you want to work in critical care, in a nursing sense, in a hospital, the fact that you have passed the NCLEX doesn't entitle you to do that. Unless UPMC has changed, and I'm sure the other hospitals do the same thing, you have to take a certification course. And that certification course takes a week, and every day you have 8 hours of lecture, you have homework each night, and that starts Monday, and on the Friday, you take a test, and you have to pass that test. And it'll be in cardiac care medicines, and if you want to be in critical care, like CCU, recovery, OR, ER, because they've got to be able to read that and go, oh, he's an AFib. Oh, he's an VFib. She's asystolic. You've got to be able to see those things. Not, even though you would know them, it's an age where everything is about people being sued and the money, and we call that vetting. Like they wouldn't let me teach here, they couldn't verify that I had a degree. Did I fool them? That was an opportunity to laugh. And try that again. Thank you. They wouldn't let me teach here unless I could prove to them I had a degree. Now how did I fool them? My wife says that when I do that, I'm talking so fast that they miss the jokes. So we're going to let you. Okay, nobody cares. They don't like you. So what the muscles in the heart are, they're very advanced cells. We call them highly differentiated. It's good news and bad news. The good news is they have a very advanced function. Okay, they've stopped replicating. We can't make any more of them. We can't make more of them. They don't get cancer. Bad news: when they're damaged, they're gone. They die. They form scar tissue. And most of the time, when they die from a lack of oxygen, a blood clot in the heart, in a big vessel going to the heart. What happens? Stops blood flow to some part of the heart. We have a fancy name for it. Don't confuse it with infection. It's called infarction. And it means tissue died from effectively lack of oxygen. There's no coming back. It doesn't get better. Part of it doesn't mean you're going to die. It depends on how extensive it is. So you can have a silent, and it's really called a myocardial infarction. And there's one that happens in your brain, it's called a stroke. If that happens, there is always damage. Whether or not the damage affects you or the person who has it is different. Yes, ma'am. Okay, I know my handwriting. INFARCTION, tissue died from lack of oxygen. And so understand, So a lot of times grandma had a heart attack, but she's okay. Nothing was really damaged. She's doing great. Something was damaged. It just didn't impact her in a way that we can observe or measure. Okay, we know that there was damage occurred, or a stroke. It was a light stroke. It was a mini stroke. There's no mini strokes. Okay, there's a thing called a TIA that you'll learn about called the transient ischemic attack or episode, which is like an alarm clock saying, you better do something now. Okay, you've got a blood vessel that's clogged someplace, or your heart's damaged, and you better get cracking on that. You're gonna have a great big stroke and die. That's the trouble. So, and a lot of people are very stubborn, and they ignore warning signs. Oh, it's something I ate. I just had a headache. I'm stressed out. If you weigh 350 pounds and your blood pressure's off the charts, you ought to be doing something about it. Doesn't mean you are, but you ought to. I'm just saying. So that's it. But the good news is they don't make cancer. The opposite is those lining cells that you either learn about today or some of you have lab. They're relatively undifferentiated. They replicate like crazy. We replace every lining cell in your stomach, small and large intestine every 3 to 6 days. Billions of cells every day. The bones that you have are not the bones you were born with. You probably have replaced your bones twice so far in your lifetime, about every 10 years. Get a new set. Not also, it's constant, it's continuous. Oh, I didn't like those bones. Don't worry, they won't be around. It's kind of like the weather in Scotland. Wait 15 minutes, it'll change. It does. Yeah, it does.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you said that whenever you have like a heart attack or a stroke, it like affects you in some way.
No, it may affect you.
Well,
It does not necessarily.
It like damages something.
That is correct.
Is that the same with like seizures? Do they always damage something?
No. It's a very good question. A seizure is kind of like, think of it as like a short circuit.
Yeah.
What happens, some of the damage when seizures happens when they're seizing, if it's grand mal or what they call, they'll hit their head. You gotta be very careful. If you don't stop the seizure, it becomes what we call status epilepticus. That can be life-threatening.
Yeah.
The biggest, normally the seizure, sometimes there's no explanation, and most of the time that's okay. Sometimes it can come from an accident, that type of thing. One of my the student I still correspond, and she's doing some graduate work. I mean, it was very, because she had her brother had seizure disorders, and things like that. So we talked about it. It's a very good question about that. A lot of times, if you see somebody seizing, the most important thing for you to do is to support their head. That really, I mean, don't be sticking your fingers in the mouth about the tongue thing.
Yeah.
Not if you want to be able to count to 10 reliably. I'm being honest with you. My first wife, it's an absolutely true story. We were at the Carnegie at the museum. Don't know why she wanted to go to the museum. It's okay. You got it. Sometimes there's a very simple answer to these things. Yes, dear.
No, I have seizures myself, so that's why I was like.
I figured there was
wondering.
something like that.
Yeah.
This is what happened. We were there and coming in to look at one of the displays on the ground floor where some mentally disabled citizens. I don't want to use pejorative terms that we can't use anymore. Okay, so they were clearly had mental disability, and a lot of times seizure disorders go along with it. Most times it does not. And all of a sudden you heard a commotion, and this young woman is on the floor. So and she, God bless my first wife. Is there a nurse in the house? She's right there. That was her thing. She raced in, and I see her on the floor. Right? I said, when I came back out, it's very stigmatizing. People soil themselves, that kind of stuff, when it's really bad. And I said, well, what did you do? She goes, the most important thing I was taught when she graduated nursing school, and she went to CCAC. There was only one campus, the main campus over on the north side, and she got her BSN at Slippery Rock later on. Hold her. I didn't know that. It's very interesting. So, I mean, so seizures are a little bit different. They can be controlled most often. So as I was saying, and that's the idea of differentiation. bad part about lining cells is they replicate so rapidly, they're very prone to cancer. Most of them, when you have a lining cell, we call an epithelial cell, that you'll be learning about in lab, they form carcinomas. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, they're not necessarily they're the most common cancers that we hear about. The most common cancer statistically is skin cancer, which a lot of people get, about 1 in 5 over their lifetime, mostly from sun exposure. Thankfully, it's typically a type that just requires excision, and it's more cosmetic. It doesn't require like radiation or chemo. But when you think of things that could kill you quick, and not that skin cancer can't, in women breast and in men prostate, they're glandular cancers. So and glandular, we use the prefix adeno or adeno, ADNO, implies gland, and then carcinoma. So breast, there's an adenocarcinoma. So that's the problem. If the cell is rapidly, and really what cancer is mitosis, and a thing called the cell cycle, which you may have studied, we're going to study again, going out of control. When it loses its control system, it's like things, biological systems go too fast. Everything we do is we hold them back. Your heart normally would have a heart rate of over 100. And a healthy heart rate's between 60 and 80. The healthier you are, going to the gym and working out, eating, exercising. For young folks, it's a little bit easier. Holds that under control. It's a very good measure of health, resting heart rate. So we're trying to hold our bodies from going out of control. And that kind of works. So that's part of it. And then we're going to talk very shortly about feedback. It's all about feedback. Nearly all of the feedback our body has is negative feedback. And negative feedback, it's not like it's, oh, you shouldn't do that. That kind of negative feedback. It is that you're going to see it's about a set point. It's got a little warm in here now. So what do we start to do? All of a sudden, I can feel myself perspiring. Because when it evaporates, it cools off. It was a little, and believe me, this building, it could be anything at any time. They're still getting the new AC units. They didn't come in soon enough to install them. They're going to do it over our winter break. So who knows? One day we could come in here and it could be blasting the air conditioning and we could have snow on the ground. So when it's cold, we start to shiver. Involuntary muscle spasms in our skeletal muscles. They generate heat. So little things like that. It's like I was telling you about temperature. So your temperature measures that. When there's variations that are enough, you start to perspire. That cools you off. It brings you closer to where your quote set point is. Just like your internal, like you set the thermostat, which we can't control. Let's say you put in your house to 72. If it went to 74, your AC kicks on. Goes back to 72, your AC kicks off. Or if it's colder, your heat. So that's negative feedback. It makes subtle but rapid adjustments to bring it quickly back to the set point. So that's what negative does. It takes it away from where it shouldn't be. There are very few mechanisms that are positive feedback. The two classic examples every A&P chapter 1 has, okay, are one, blood clotting. If anything, once your blood starts to clot, it doesn't, oh, I'm clotting a little and it stops clotting. It keeps clotting. It makes more and more. As long as the chemicals are out there that induce clotting, it will clot basically until the wound has clotted over. So it goes to the completion of the event that started it all. The other is delivering a baby vaginally. So as the baby enters the birth canal, normally muscle spasms, when you stretch a muscle, it pushes back. Here, that would be bad. So we keep the muscle stretches and it increases and it increases and it keeps pushing to completion. So it's reverse of what normally, when muscles respond reflexively, they kind of push backwards. This doesn't. It continues contracting and contracting and eventually pushes the baby out until such time as the baby is delivered. We call that, fancy name, we call it self-amplifying. It just means it gets bigger. And down the road in AP2, we look at the clotting cascade. You don't have to memorize it. It gives you an idea of the different steps, maybe why somebody has a disease called hemophilia, how we treat these things if someone has a stroke or a heart attack, how sometimes we can try to stop them clotting if we get to it very, very quickly. Little things like that. So that's, that's where we have, and you'll see the illustrations about that. And all of the things, when we talk about balance, we endeavor to do that. If we have it from our diet, if not, our bodies know to ingest that. I need to rehydrate. I'm feeling a little shaky. Maybe I need sugar, or I need protein, or whatever. But you sense that without really knowing it. And sometimes it's just trial and error. I better eat this or drink this. Now I'm feeling better. Most of the time, it's dehydration is pretty common for a lot of us that are there. And really, and the whole, I don't know what that makes a lot of sense to me. Energy processes keep cells active. I'm a big believer in use it or lose it. I like to keep, my mom lived to 93 and was cogent. It's really, she succumbed to Alzheimer's. When I dare say she might have been 90 by then. She drove till she was 86. And so, I mean, and she said, I could do, when she was basically in a retirement community that later really was a big community where eventually went to assisted and then to nursing home care. She still had a vehicle. She goes, I could do everything. I could go to the bank, and the beauty parlor, and the drugstore, and the grocery, all and get everything in one day. I do it over 5 days because every day I want to get up, I shower, I get dressed, I go out, and I interact with the world. So it was really keeping those activities. She maintained that. Just from that wonderful age where she had an appointment, the 10 o'clock Friday appointment at the beauty parlor to get her hair done. And it could be, her life ended in Rochester, New York. It could be a foot of snow. I'm going. But no, I'm getting my hair done. She was that wonderful age. It's tremendous. But it's absolutely true. So and a lot of that's why I continue to suppose I could stop. But other than the fact I really like doing it, I have a great time. I hope I'm entertaining you and you're learning something. But it keeps the brain box sharp. I like to think. So I think that's part of it. And growth and reproduction and responsiveness are pretty straightforward. There's nothing really I could say to amplify this. We're getting there, everybody. You're making good progress. I'm just checking my time. Don't know why. Yes, I was. I'm gonna go look. So, metabolism, and we'll look at this when we look at energetics. Metabolism is a neat way of saying all the energy everything we do with energy. Okay? It's how basically all of the reactions in our bodies, and really they break down someplace where I don't have to put this. Everybody can see. I'll try to be neat. No guarantees. We have 2 types of reactions that make up metabolism. We either build things up or break things down. So anabolism, Anabolism, is how we store energy, and we store it in bonds. And that's where we build things. Make new membranes, make new organs, make new cells, whatever. The opposite is catabolism. And you think of anabolism, you think of like anabolic steroids, they build you up. Catabolism, Catabolism, we think of a catastrophe. We release energy to do different kinds of work. And we break things up, we break bonds, we break things apart. Very simple. And a lot of times we're doing them simultaneously. Like you may be taking out energy in what you have for dinner tonight and replenishing some of those cells that I talked about that we have to rebuild constantly. You very much are. So all of this, and this is another one where the PowerPoint's kind of not right. Being kind. Respiration. We don't make energy. First law, what's the first law of physics? Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It only can be transformed. We don't make no energy. We used to say in my old day. We ain't making energy today. Forget about it. I can talk in full-blown New Yorkese. Okay? Respiration, whether bringing in oxygen or giving it to the tissue, assists in energy transformation. We don't make any energy. Every time we change energy, we lose some of it as heat. We're efficient. When we make ATP, typically from sugar in our bodies, we lose 60% of it as heat. It's only a 40% efficient, and we're very efficient. That's enough to keep us going. If you're a business and lost 60 cents of every dollar you're trying to make, you wouldn't be in business very long. Okay? But biologically, everything is different with regard to, and yes, it's oxygen and carbon dioxide. Digestion and absorption are different. Digestion is a mechanical and chemical process to break things down so that they are small enough that they can be absorbed, that actually they can go into your system. And circulation is self-explanatory, and excretion is self-explanatory. That's, to me, that's why I like the term energy transformations, because that's what we're doing. We're changing energy, and sometimes we store it, sometimes we have to use it to do different kinds of work. There's waste products that are associated with it. We know, and I use the term transformation because that whole created and destroyed thing to me is scientifically inaccurate. And I think of that from a test-taking process. So you're taking a licensure exam and they say, respiration, you make energy. True or false? It's false. You don't make energy. If you say transform energy, that's where they catch you. It's the whole part of what you have to do is be a very good test taker, and that comes from reading questions very carefully. The trick is in the questions, and the trick is in looking at the answers. And you got to look at, we call wrong answers have a great name. You did not know it in educational psychology. They're called distractors. They're there to distract you. That sounds plausible. Watch out. That's how they trip you up. I'm guilty of this. I'm trying to get you ready. I'm more forgiving. So voila. This isn't a big deal. We need water, food, and air. I'll buy it. Getting hungry as we speak. Okay? Water, for sure. I mean, there's nothing here that you don't already know. What's interesting is fluids. We have fluids in the cells we call intracellular. We have fluids outside the cells we call extracellular. In your bloodstream, there's fluid. It's not quite the same as the blood that's just outside of as the fluid rather, that's just outside of your cells. They're very similar. They have, we're going to learn about that. They have a different composition, but they're very, very similar. We're going to learn about an interesting concept. It has to do with why fluids, why we want to make sure we don't push too much fluid inside of a cell and take a chance of having it burst, or suck too much fluid out and having it shrink. Because either way, it won't work. And so fluids have to be done, like in a hospital, we use specialized fluids that don't allow that to happen. We start an IV, and it hasn't changed in all the years I've been there. They use something called normal saline mostly. It's normal because it will neither push fluids in or suck fluids out. I will go into the science of that with you in this class, where we're going to learn about that concept. We'll see some illustrations of what it does. What makes it normal? Because of the relationship it has between all the stuff that's dissolved. For instance, inside your cell, the fluids have a lot of potassium, not outside your cell. Proportionally, outside of your cell, your fluids have more sodium, not so much inside your cell. There are differences. And that's something that's kind of worth remembering. Let's see, what else? We have this. Okay. So food, nutrients, oxygen, yeah. I mean, does it directly release energy from food? No. Again, I would say it assists energy release. That's what I mean. You got to be careful, even in what you do, making too many direct statements. Sometimes they need qualification. And this is what I mean. So the fluid inside the cell, what they call intracellular fluid, even though it's very similar chemically, not identical. So the fluid in your bloodstream, typically we call plasma, and the fluid that's interstitial means in between the tissues. That fluid, it's similar, but they all have different constituents, although they have basic similarities that ensure that the fluid doesn't move around ridiculously. It's not like every time I take a drink of a liquid, all of a sudden my cells are not going to explode. So we're very careful with what we use the fancy term is infuse. It's very interesting. A lot of students are interested in emergency work. I mean, there's a whole lot that goes on with it. Did that for, my first wife was a head nurse at ER, Inner City Hospital in Philadelphia. We had some wild times. Just like to see on TV. Oh my goodness gracious. Hey. Crazy. But fun. Heat, okay. People, they don't understand. Yeah. Form of energy, maintain body temperature. Understand that temperature sometimes is your friend. The way we heal is from a process that you learn about, not in this course, but in AP2 called inflammation. It's part of your immune system. It increases your internal temperature scientifically. Your healing factors, your white blood cells get made faster. They're more active. There are more chemicals. It's designed to accelerate those mechanisms that control damage and repair it up to a point. If it doesn't get better and the fever doesn't break, now you have a problem. So people in healthcare begin to understand, they still have that fever, that's still there, then it's a problem. Or is it up and down? They get hot, that's what malaria does. Very hot, then very cold. There's ebbs and flows. So there's certain telltales, not that you see a lot of malaria. Folks who get malaria, generally it's insect-borne. So it comes from mosquitoes. So we have problems with mosquitoes, but that particular mosquito you rarely see here. Okay, it's much more associated with rainforest mosquitoes. When we do mosquito spraying around here, biggest place where we have problems around here, standing water, because that's where insects breed. Mosquitoes breed there, and I live in Cranberry Township. If you didn't know, we live in Tick Central. That tick is associated with all those things I see in the morning when I walk the dog. They're big, they're tan, they've got white tails. He thinks they're other dogs, so he wants to be friends, but they're deer. So we live in Lyme disease central. That was a big dog. Yes, it was. I have a cute dog. Here. You see, I feel bad because I get you so out of sequence. I forget. Is this it? Oh, that's the cat. It's a cute cat. That's one of two. That's Cloud. He's in charge. CIC, cat in charge. He was a rescue. Now he's in charge. It's a nice cat. But this is just hay. You see him on campus. He's got an RMU hat. If I see him at the game. No. That's Lincoln. Irish Doodle, 74 pounds. Big dog. Woof. Very sweet. Don't tell him. Not the sharpest knife in the old dog drawer, if you get my idea. Like sit. Huh? Stay. Told you to stay. It's cute. I'm your best friend. No, you're your best friend. Okay. So moving on. And pressure, we'll get into it. I mean, atmospheric pressure helps to push the oxygen in. Hydrostatic pressure is another term for blood pressure. When we're measuring your blood pressure, that means hydrostatic means force, really, really forces associated with water. And really, that's what's going on in your blood pressure. When you measure that, okay, you take someone's blood pressure, and what happens is that's part of the delivery mechanism. As the blood vessels get smaller and smaller, the pressure goes down, and then but there's enough of a difference that it allows stuff to be pushed out, like nutrients. And we go over that when we look a bit. And again, that's more AP2. If you're getting the idea, in AP2, it's a lot more about how things work, the physiology, and much less about the anatomy. We don't do that in this course. So we cover it in a lot of places too. It's not impossible, but it's unlikely. And that's why I qualify that. I mean, someone who have for AP2, if it's not me, might have homework, might have requirements that use the text, things like that. Dr. Robbins will do all the labs. I tend to teach more micro than a lot of the students have, more because it's something different for me. And I do enjoy it because I'm clinically oriented in micro, so I know a lot about the diseases. And this is homeostasis. We're self-regulated. And this is all you need. And it's very simple. We have a sensor that tells us it's warm. Like me, I'm warm in here. Doesn't mean it's warm. It's a receptor. Okay. Inside my control center, my brain, says it's hot. And at that point, it sends out an effector. Another nerve goes to my sweat glands and goes, hey, get busy. This guy's got to get cooled off. Pretty simple. I mean, it's more complicated than that, obviously. How often it does that, or how long it does it. And some people more than I tend to perspire pretty easily, comparatively. Some people do. I mean, my wife and I, when we look at it like in sports, some people are just, oh my God, cover. That's me. She stays, not so much like that, comparatively. So it can be a muscle or a gland. Like if it's cold, the sensor would have said it's cold. Your brain would have said, send signals to those muscles to get contracting, to shiver, and muscle movement generates heat. So it could be a muscle or a gland. It just depends. That's homeostasis. So the set point, whatever that is, it's when your set point alters. Homeostasis, when it's not working, means the person's in big trouble. And anybody in healthcare checks for that. That's what they call the vital signs. Blood pressure, respiration, temperature, okay, pulse, all those things. If they're irregular, it means those set points are off, and usually it has to do a lot, potentially, with water. Sometimes dehydration is a very, very common thing that we see associated with, but that's a snapshot. It means if you can't maintain your set points, there's something wrong inside. Is it a circulatory problem? Is it a respiratory problem? Is it a chemical problem? Is it a diabetic who's out of control? Know now that there's one disease to learn the most about for most people that are going to be in healthcare is diabetes. I mean, maybe you'll make exceptions for infants if you're going to do neonatal or peds and things like that. You don't see it quite. You do see it, but you see it with some degree of infrequency. But in general med surg, nursing, and general patient care, diabetes. And that's what happens. It makes tiny changes around the set point, bringing it back to or bringing it up to or down to the set point, whatever it calls for. It's the most common, we call it negative feedback. That's what it means. It resets it back to the normal range quickly. As soon as it starts to deviate, it begins to reset. And it will continue to do so until it reaches that point, negative, because the change moves it in the opposite direction it's going in. Temperature's going up, we want to bring it back down. Temperature's going down, we want to bring it back. So, I mean, that's the name everybody uses. However, it helps you to remember it. And again, this is really the best statement. Prevents sudden changes. Sudden changes are bad. So when you see somebody, you're so concerned about it. You see somebody comes in with 103, 104 temperature. That means the set points are all messed up. That's not just regular inflammation. Somebody's got a great big infection someplace or something else is going on. Maybe they have pneumonia, if they have trouble breathing, that kind of stuff. It's be on top of it. Okay, so negative feedback controls all of those things. Nowadays, we do it with blood glucose all the time. It's when diabetics basically have the inability for those mechanisms to work for whatever the reason. It's very, very detailed. Another one of those things I know a lot about. And again, it's although I am not one, but I would be considered a pre-diabetic because my grandfather's diabetic. Biological grandfather was diabetic. I use the term biological for children or for offspring or things like that because my children are adopted. So it's not, I'm not, it clarifies it for me. I'll say birth mother. They're still, I'm their dad. My ex is their mom. It's their mom. You get one mom to go around. That's me. So I have to impart a little bit of what's impactful to me, and we all do. But I try to be open about it. I mean, what you should be hearing from me now, I tell every class, my teaching philosophy is very simple. If I'm not enthusiastic, why would you be? I mean, I can get up here and read this darn thing to you. So I was going to say a bad word. She's like, you're going to drop an F-bomb. You're all thinking. Oh, you should hear us at home. My folks were like that. Until I was 21, I never heard them swear. After that, I never heard them stop. Mom! F him and the horse that brought him. Mom! My mom was in assisted care. I was staying there. I had come up. I wasn't staying there. I was staying with my sisters. I went down to. I was going to have dinner with her in the assisted care, and they come in. They're very nice, very fancy. Would you like to sit over there? There's that lady. There's 2 seats. My mother said, "Oh no, thank you." Very, very nice. 91-year-old lady. She sits down with a walker next to me. She leans over to me. She's a bitch. Go Ruth. It's a Ruth story. I'll tell my sister about it. And see, I don't get anything out of these. If these help you, good. This is temperature and all that. It tells you what it does and who's doing all that. I mean, that's. I don't like illustrations or graphics that have that have too much information. It's very hard to see. So positive, again, uncommon. The change is intensified. We're trying to get to the end point to control the problem. Think of it that way. So it makes it more. We call it, there's fancy terms. We use cascading. We use self-amplification. It's the way it works. Okay? Activity of the effector is increased initially instead of decreased. It doesn't bring it up or bring it down like negative does. It's very short-lived. It may be temporarily unstable, but it doesn't look, well, that's kind of the opposite of homeostasis. But the reality is these are things that need to be certainly bleeding, having a baby, but we want to get those things to the conclusion. You got to get the blood, the clot, etc. That kind of thing. It's really important. So you can see that. And down the road, when we start talking about male and female repro, even the onset of menstruation has certain negative feedback element, positive feedback elements. It's very, very interesting. That's down the road, you see that a lot more. And depending on what you're doing career-wise, reality is if you go into a specialty, if you go into, let's say nursing, you're doing maternal child nursing, you learn more about that. If you're going into a neuro floor, you learn more about that. Psych floor, you learn more about that. Orthopedic floor. Because you get more information from that, and if you and you try to, because you're going to work with that all the time. Fascinating. And they're just showing that stuff to you. Very good illustration. All the textbooks have it. We're nearly done. Thank goodness. Okay, and it really is showing you an us. The digestive system is like a tube that passes through it from your mouth to your anus. When I take that drink, it didn't go inside yet. It's traversing. Frankly, most of it's not going to make it. Okay, it's going to eventually be excreted. But what happens is that's the process. It has to be absorbed. First, it will be broken down to compatibility with absorption and absorbed into the bloodstream. Mostly, there's other ways it gets absorbed too. Something called lymphatics. It will be then distributed through the cardiovascular system. In the meantime, that's why respiration and heart are intertwined forever. It has to, at the same time, that blood has to receive more oxygen and be distributed. So the lungs have to come into the play to get rid of the carbon dioxide, increase the oxygen. We're not done yet. Before we can deliver it to the tissue or after, we have that blood has to go to the kidney, and the kidney is going to filter that blood and get rid of waste products that haven't been expelled already. Okay, and they're going to have to get rid of, and they're going to have to adjust the chemicals. They're going to have to adjust acid and base balance, we call pH, which we'll learn more about how that works, all of those things. And so they're all interrelated, and then we go back and start all over again. So you'll see that when once, and you can imagine now, just from this diagram, if the lungs have trouble breathing, it's going to impact the heart. It's going to impact circulation. The kidneys are nothing more than a high pressure filter. If they're not getting enough blood flow, kidneys have one response: they shut down. Doesn't matter. Not enough blood flow, they shut down. Get an infection, they shut down. Kidneys shut down. Kidneys shut down. All of a sudden, waste products accumulate back up into your bloodstream, and you are in trouble. Big trouble. ICU type trouble. And so, I mean, it kind of gives you the interrelationship, and then there's other systems that are involved, obviously. But these are really big time players that we see. This is what you may have started in the lab or gotten in the lab. I'm not going to do that. That's all. To me, that is all lab. Body cavities, nomenclature, frontal, occipital, temporal, the whole stuff. I could do it in my sleep on my worst day. I knew the name of the bones and keep telling people about it for 50 years. I used to train doctors and residents and medical students. Now I've got nursing students. So I mean, it's just like, I joke, I could fly out of my bed on my worst day and be able to do bones and stuff like that. So I'm not going to do any of that. Thank you. But the systems I would urge you to review. Take a look at what they are and what they do. What's part of them? Integumentary is skin, basically. Skeletal, bones. Joints, which are kind of part of it. Not really. We look at them separately. Muscular, what's in there? All of those systems. And they do it pretty well here. Nervous, we're going to get to spend a lot of time with. Endocrine is AP2. But look at some of the structures that are part of it. And they'll have this, I'm sure, text-wise. Even though we're not necessarily doing it, be aware of what's in each of these systems, if you can. And you can see this is a nice way of doing it and what they each do. Some of the main, so glands that are in there: pituitary, thyroid, ovaries, testes, pancreas, heart, arteries, capillaries, digestive, all those things. Respiratory, mostly lungs, but how does the air get there or get out? Okay. You don't have to memorize it, but just be generally familiar. I would ask you to do that. I don't like this part of the unit, so we're going to skip it. I generally do the aging part at the end. But look through this, because it's absolutely true. I mean, this is a difficult week for you because you're getting all this information. For me, it's hard for me to do this, even though I'm not doing a lot of physical. I'm talking for 6.5 hours. When I'm doing the lab, my advanced anatomy students, hands-on stuff. You're pretty busy, and I mean, this is what happens. Yeah, we know about hair changes, wrinkling of the skin. No, believe it or not, I haven't had any work done yet. Okay. Don't laugh. This is the original factory equipment. No, I had my nose broken so many times that had to be fixed. And I'm sure they did cosmetic stuff with it. That was 40 years ago. Didn't make a difference. Nobody asked me to model. other than being the before one, not the after. Okay, we're not talking about the hair. Okay, and the skin changes. Okay, more than that, the subcutaneous fat is not there, and that plays a really big role. That demonstrates part of those problems. I don't wear this because I like to have this on my hand. I mean, it's very hard sometimes for me because I have arthritis, particularly in this hand more than others. I have a kind of arthritis that's immunological, but I don't really take anything special for it. That's why I try to do activities. All of those things. I do take blood pressure medicine. Okay, there's a hereditary component to that. Thankfully, I don't have diabetes, but I saw my family doc June 30th. We keep checking it. The test that we use that you'll become familiar is what? Other than just testing your sugar level, there's another blood test they do. It's called hemoglobin A1C. It measures how much sugar is being carried on your hemoglobin. It's a very good monitor if you're pre-diabetic or if you're diabetic or you're on the cusp, and if you're diabetic, how well your treatment is going. It's interesting called glycosylated, which is kind of a sugar component associated with the hemoglobin. And it's relatively, when I say relatively new, that's within the last 20 years or so. So atrophy and organ shrink. It didn't reflect it in the scale, this shrinkage. See, that was supposed to be funny. Thanks. I thought this was going to be the friendly class. But no, I get occasional smiles. And this, you probably hear, most students have heard of telomeres, the shortening of the chromosomes, which is associated with aging. And they're coming out with enzymes to stop that. That's part of aging theory. We'll get into aging and cancer theory a little bit. Part of it, all of those things. And the reality is, all of these things are true. And Alzheimer's and mental and various types of dementia don't play favorites. They don't. My mom succumbed to it, but again, it didn't demonstrate itself until she was 90. There are a lot of people. My ex's dad, it kind of hit him probably before he was 70, even though he lived to be about 80 years old. But you could see the deterioration. He had to stop driving and stuff like that. Everybody's different. My kids are convinced I'm in full blown. My oldest is convinced. If you get an email from someone named Adam Stein in the military, if my dad's doing anything suspicious, let me know. We're trying to get him into the nursing home. I'm not joking. He's like, did you get that nursing home insurance? You may need it, Dad. This is what I have to put up with. Absolutely. It's like that. And that'll be for lab. I think we're done. I hope we're done. Yeah, baby, we're done. Thank you very much. So it'll be a long recording. Hopefully it continues to record the whole thing. If not, I will send you copies of the ones from the other classes because effectively they are the same. Oh, this is going to be